Martin, you're very, very welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today. How's life with you?
Thank you, Rory. Everything is good. Yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent. I'm immediately intrigued by a piece of art behind you there, and I suppose I'm just going to start with my natural curiosity. Maybe you can't speak to it. Maybe you can, but
yeah. Well, it's by a painter, Marc Chagall. Now, me in visual art, I arrived at Chicago in 1985, and I don't think I had ever been to an actual art museum in my life.
Yeah,
and knew nothing about it. But in the coming years in Chicago, I seemed to kind of get to know some painters like Helen O'Toole, Helen O'Leary, various other very good and upcoming Irish painters. But anyway, apart from that, I just Chicago was a land of discovery. But one of the great places in Chicago is the Chicago Art Institute, and I kind of got into just going there for a day, and I did it repeatedly, and I saw lots of all the things I had never seen, and knew nothing about, but I didn't really study it very well, and still I would say I don't know a lot. But what I did was I went repeatedly, and some things would stick out to you, and would kind of you'd be drawn towards, and others maybe not so much. But I do remember I saw Chagall, and I liked it, I liked the modern 20th century painters. And anyway, I then went to a retrospective of Chagall, I remember, and at the Chicago Art Institute, and I saw his lifetime work, and it was very inspiring because he actually didn't change that much, and I actually came to the conclusion, was he always just trying to make the same painting, on some level he kind of was, and so all it was you have a thing, you know how to do it, get to the bottom of it. And I go, okay, that's probably what I should be doing musically as well. You have a thing, you have a fairly straightforward, simple thing. Get to the bottom of it. Go as far as you can with that actual thing. And the other thing with Chagall was, of course, there was always a fiddle, or not always, but in many of his paintings, a fiddle pop up. So of course that gave him an immediate, he's clearly superior to many others, obviously. So, the fiddle,
well, he was kind of like your spirit animal almost,
Yeah. Anyway, I can't say, I wouldn't profess to be like an art buffer or to really know my way around that world well, but I, as an amateur enthusiast, I could go to those galleries and enjoy it,
Well, it speaks to the incredible power of any kind of art, and in that context there, this notion of getting to the bottom of it, for it to present you with this kind of philosophical proposition, or to speak to you at that level, and to give you something to contemplate and reflect on, that's like, if we all had that known, our life would be in some way complete. It's like, there's your path, on you go.
That's right. I'll move my head here a second now so you can see a photograph there in the back of another fiddle, and that's Martin Rochford from Bodyke in East Clare. That's a photograph, but it's a photograph taken by Christy McNamara, the photographer who I'm sure you know quite well as well. So anyway, that's it. There's two fiddles, and unfortunately I positioned it pretty badly, like that. Whenever I'm on the camera, I got my head right in front of it. Such as
well, the maybe the masters have your back there in one sense.
Yeah, we can think of it that way. Yeah.
So Chicago comes up a lot when people hear about you or think about you. It seemed to be like the deep early immersion for you in the world, or this kind of coming of age. Is that a fair way of putting it?
I suppose, I grew up in East Clare, up in what would, for most people in Clare, maybe recognise the townland through the television mast that's on top of Mahara. So the townland of Mahara is where I would have grown up. And so I basically came from the side of that mountain, and I went from there to Chicago basically. I mean, I had travelled before that a bit, but I hadn't lived anywhere else really, And so it was a big change of life, a big change of, just everything really. So it like I think those years in the 80s became like this time to kind of, maybe I'm free, I'm away from family, I'm away from my whole social environment. I'm going, oh, I could be anybody, anything. I could think anyway. I could reinvent my life in any number of ways, I think, So Chicago became this kind of coming of age, becoming like kind of the person that I am, I suppose, in a way, or the musician that I am, and all of that kind of thing. So Chicago was just this, it's a huge city. It's a huge multicultural city. It's also, oddly enough, for its size, a kind of a backwater as well, like in that, like, like America has this bi-coastal reality as well, which is everything is on the West Coast or the East Coast, that people just can't imagine kind of going into Chicago. But it was a rich musical environment, a rich cultural environment, and lots and lots and lots and lots of interesting things and people,
Yeah, I was curious about the multicultural aspect, and you mentioned it there. I'm wondering how influential that was on you specifically musically, and to have that kind of fusion, because obviously you're synonymous with tradition, but then you're also synonymous with evolution of tradition. And I'm wondering where all the kind of threads might have kicked in Chicago.
Well, I suppose one of the things that I saw, like they say, like Chicago was one of the most ethnically diverse cities, if not the most ethnically diverse city in America, which is something you don't expect in the Midwest.
Yeah.
But it was. But like, I suppose like the first like awakening you get is like, oh my God, we're just a little culture in a vast sea of cultures, and music, and like the centrality that we imagine we have. Like you go, okay, it's not as central as we'd like to think, But that and along with the vastness of America itself, like they kind of crush your ego, like you become proportionately less significant. You can be somebody around Feakle, like you can even be somebody around East Clare. But boy, I'll tell you, like you become nobody in Chicago very fast, like and actually, it's a bit harsh in a way, but it's also really good for you. It's just really good for you to kind of like have to kind of understand and accept all of that, and so you kind of like, it dismantles your ego a little bit. I mean, not entirely, of course, but it was also kind of meant that I kind of, maybe being in such a place so far away in a multicultural environment, I could kind of think about Ireland with a degree of objectivity, and that, and my own experience growing up there, and my own experience with the music and all that, to kind of like not be afraid to ask the questions and not be afraid to be objective about what all that was. Because, like, with music, with culture, all those kinds of things, we get like loads and loads of sentimentality and emotion and connection and family and pride and nationalism and everything mixed into our understanding of these things. So sometimes it can be very interesting to pry all of that apart, and see. So with the piece of music, if you took everything apart, like, would the piece of music actually stand up? Would it really be worth listening to as a thing if we didn't know where it came from? It was like a kind of useful experiment,
I think it takes a degree of courage to kind of face the wider reality, because I think like we all see now that nationalism and ethno-nationalism, and there's a kind of new era of tribalism almost emerging, where we can kind of bunker in and feel good in our corner. But it's like to broaden out and zoom out, as many astronauts have experienced when they go up there above and look down. Then you get to ask those big questions and see a wider reality. But it can require some degree of courage to, how would I say, challenge your own beliefs, perhaps.
Yeah, no, it is true, because like, if you genuinely ask the question about the thing you do, then you must implicitly be able to accept a result that you didn't want.
Yes.
Like like, so if you to undergo honest inquiry around that was important. I mean, I found that kind of historically, in terms of our history, in terms of religion, in terms of everything like that. I go, okay, it's all up. Okay, everything is up for investigation now. No, I don't claim to be such an incredible expert in all of this that I kept at the bottom line truth of everything. Of course not.
Yeah.
But it did nonetheless help, kind of free me up to kind of think more independently and to kind of, not have too many, monkeys on my shoulders, like not too much baggage,
Yeah. Yeah, even as I listen to it, it's coming back to me now that I think some of my own formative experiences when after university, I moved to San Francisco, and that was very much like what you're saying,
A wonderful city, yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't really managed to settle since, to be honest. In a spiritual sense and also maybe a physical sense, but I've often been curious because I've just arrived to a new home. And I'm surrounded by several families and people that have been here multi-generations. And in fact, there's an old kind of famine soup kitchen very close to my house. And I find myself kind of really contemplated the continuity of time and all that's gone on and some of the generational links that still stand. And I suppose also honouring that tradition. And part of me envies. I know envy isn't meant to be a great sort of virtue, but part of it, well, let's say admires, or contemplates on the idea of what would it be like to have never left somewhere and to know your own parish and your own four corners. And I'm actually not suggesting for a minute that the people around here have never gone anywhere because
no.
Any of them,
I understand that too, and I think like there are very valid ways to go in both. Like, I mean, any path, I suppose, is valid. Like, but there is something like deeply rich about staying connected to the roots, staying connected to the people that you were connected from the kind of networking yourself into the reality of where you come from, so that like you become completely satisfied with that as well. The problem is like when you dabble then and you start doing that, those two roles they're not, you can't just switch from one to the other as easily as all of that, so when you kind of, I mean, for me, like I lived in America for like 26 years, so like there's no way that I can ever get that out of my system, like that's a fundamental part of who I am,
Yeah. And I'm curious, like I have the sense that your roots were so strong in East Clare that they allowed you to remain stable as you travelled. You weren't like taking flight aimlessly. There was a route there to anchor you.
I always loved Ireland. Like it was never I got to get out of here, Never that. Like that like I never had that feeling at all. And but and the other thing was, I suppose, like the traditional music that I play is so completely sourced in Ireland, and like more specifically in Clare, like it's so drawn out of that soil that like that was always going to be, I was never not going to be able to have that with me, that was kind of to who I am and what I do, and it still is, like, after, I'm in my 60s now, like, so like it's still like very much the like driving thing, inside of me, like this music from Clare that I am so kind of proud of and like connected to, so no matter where I was, that seemed to always just be with me,
Yeah, I'm getting the sense of you now as if let's say Clare was its own kingdom or republic, which many might advocate for, but it's almost like you were propelled into the world as a ambassador, a roving ambassador, or an envoy of, to spread this. And I suppose that's obviously there are some shadow sides to globalization, let's say, but on the other hand, there's the spreading of all these cultures and the knowledge and the wisdom and the joy and the beauty that comes with reconnecting as kind of one human family, if you like.
Yeah, I have a theory that over time, and you can see it happening with migration, and you can see it, is that like there's a cultural, like, we will have to, as human beings, like live in a much more multicultural kind of way, environment. And our cultural, emblems, our icons, our music, our poetry, our language, our, all these various things, we'll have to know how to exist in a much more diverse world. Like one idea for me is like traditional Irish music, being a kind of a form of world music, like a music form that doesn't require the location, doesn't require the cultural background, but actually exists as a music genre, like in the world, and I believe that in many ways that's already happening, and I think, for that to happen, like we need to know what its strengths are, and what it really offers, and where it stands in a spectrum of music and art, and so those have been kind of my, areas of curiosity all my life. But I love the thought that traditional Irish music can, it's a bit like Elon Musk, human beings like escaping the planet, like and like setting up on Mars. There's a bit about like kind of, well, traditional music. Like, for example, I met people of non-Irish extraction, right, who had never been to Ireland, who played traditional Irish music for one reason or another, and who played it well and loved it. And I go, this is really important, actually. This is really important.
Yeah, I'm originally from Cavan, and my brother lives in Seoul in Korea, and he's a musician, and he meets Korean musicians that can play old Cavan songs for him in traditional. So isn't that phenomenal?
It is, yeah. It is quite amazing, yeah. Like in Japan and all over, you hear this, and it's great.
I hear a kind of a confidence in your identity, if you like, your origins, your roots, your identity, your culture, and that perhaps sets the template or the foundation for evolution in a way. Because I also find myself pondering where we're at with all the kind of civil unrest and the division that's going on at the moment, and a lot of it tends to go back to identity and people feeling threatened by the other, or by trans people, or by brown people, or Asian people, or whatever it might be. And I see that many of the most culturally adept people that I know in Ireland that are well versed in language, story, music, song, they're in no way threatened at all because they're so confident in their culture.
Yeah, I think that is actually, you might have kind of hit out something very important there, which is the confidence in your culture, like the confidence that it is real. And that confidence only comes when you question it, like you, and so, but to question it, you kind of have to ponder the possibility that it might not be strong, or you might not find it to be that, But, I do think that, like for me, like the strength of my faith in that Irish music culture is the result of, being truthful about it, like of not pretending to be something else, of not pretending it is something else, or presenting it as some other kind of like mythical something or other, And I'm not presented as any of those things. Like everything I say about music, like, comes out of direct experience and comes out of my knowledge of other older musicians and their experience and thought and thinking. Like there's not a single woolly thought that's not backed up by an experience or an encounter or a musician or a musician's thinking that completely supports my understanding of what this is, you know?
Lovely. I like that. Have you been criticized much along the way, or have you felt criticized?
I didn't. Yeah, I have been criticized, but I didn't really realize. I remember, like soon after I brought up my first album, that's when you begin to find out things. Like I looked at some comments online on an online forum, and then I go, don't ever do that again.
Yes.
Don't ever look at that again. Like, so I never have.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there will be, like, you can't possibly please everybody. And it's also it's an area of culture, where people get quite worked up and possessive and defensive and God knows what else. Like, so I can only imagine, like, the resentments and the things that might actually be out there. And part of it is that, like, I went through that process myself when I was younger, like, of, like jealousy. Like, jealousy is like, it's so bad that we never even mention it, right? It's the thing that nobody wants to own. Like, nobody wants to say, I was jealous of.
Yes.
But it's there. And I was jealous of other people's success, and I was kind of resentful and blah blah of not being acknowledged, and all of this stuff that goes into a career, And but like I remember saying, this is poison. Like, this is poison to the process. Like, so I had to kind of like talk myself through this, like, kind of get into that, like, to allow others to have their success and not feel competitive with it, and not feel that anybody else's success had any impinged upon mine in any way, so like just slowly getting to understand that, slowly getting to accept that, like, kind of like was very freeing. Like, but so like, I suppose I can imagine, I was thinking recently, there must be young musicians out there, like, seeing me playing, like, to audiences everywhere and having acknowledgement and recognition, and they must be thinking, I could do that. And you know what? They could. And but of course I have given a lifetime of effort, like, like, I built this thing, like, so that might not be always apparent or obvious to, like, another young musician, but I can imagine that there would have to be somebody saying, he's not that good. I definitely could do that.
Yeah.
I can do that better. I mean, like, if that wasn't happening, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, so they might see in somewhere iconic like the Sydney Opera House and go, your man just from East Clare on in there, and sure, but they didn't see the journey over 20 or 40, 50 years, and they didn't see
that, like, of course, no. It's like I had to just, start from nowhere, with all of this, like, but they might also, like, think that what I do isn't the right thing. They might also think that that's not true Irish music, or that's not real Irish music, that it should be played this way, and it should be in this style, it should be this tempo, what have you, So I can, but what? See, the thing is, like, I just don't care.
Yeah, well, this is it.
Genuinely care, like,
this is it. And I feel like a lot of this goes back to your comment about the ego, and it's in many ways there's the technical and the giftedness of the art form that people work with, but then there's the art of being a human being and navigating the human condition and some of the shadow sides. I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, that
jealousy, it's not a word, it's not even a conversation that many of us will own up to having.
No, of course. See, and like, I mean, like, we all have our demons. In fact, what I discovered with the music was that, like, the real way forward was the quote unquote the human way forward. The real way forward was to actually deal with myself. Like, the music is not that complicated, and the process of making music not that complicated, but the process of being the right kind of human being to make music in the right kind of way, very complicated. Like, so like, trying to sort through that, I felt like was
Yeah.
the real kernel of my musical journey.
Yeah, it's like that saying, get out of your own way.
Good. Exactly. And which is very easy to say.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, you had a lot of what we call success as a very young man. You won All-Ireland Flas as a 13 and 40. Maybe you were like a Dublin All-Ireland winning team where you were going hard at a young age.
Yeah.
Did that kind of propel a difficult shadow in terms of the ego, whereby suddenly you're 18, you're 19, you're like, I'm the king of the world? Or was there anything going on there?
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought I was king of the world, but I was very cocky in a certain sense that I knew what this music was and that I understood it and that I was good at it. Like I felt very confident about that. But that's where I say going to Chicago a couple of years later.
Yeah, it leveled you out. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, like I was nobody, and all of the success of the teenage me was, well, who cares? Like, like it has no bearing on anything. And it meant that like I had to kind of go through the kind of ego defrocking, like that came like with finding myself in Chicago and just trying to kind of, it was like a painful experience of letting go of like what had become something of a central identity for me,
Yeah.
Like I am somebody, like I am like the All-Ireland champion playing music, and I play in this kind of Clare style of music, and I come out of this particular heritage of music, and that is all very important to me. And people are going,
I don't give
I'm into the Lithuanian thing over here, and I'm well, it's like so, like the importance of that identity I could see was not very significant,
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that you worked in a bar or worked in multiple bars, I'm not sure, and also played in like what might be considered your typical Irish pub band. So you would have been banging out the cover. Like that for a lot of finely gifted musicians can be quite challenging to say I'm bigger than this. Was it?
Like it was absolutely like I was playing the Black Velvet Band and Danny Boy and the Wild Colonial Boy and all of this stuff like that. Like it was so bad that like the reality was I never had to learn any of those tunes. They were so unchallenging to me.
Yeah.
Like I never had, like so. And the other thing was like I had this like painful kind of feeling of going against and abandoning and disrespecting a deep richness, that I was clearly very familiar with, and that was very central and important to me. Like, so my ego like took like an enormous battering in those years, like in that sense that like I was going, okay, so forget it, Martin, whoever you thought you were, you're not,
Yeah, and when the ego takes a battering, like it's easy enough to kind of hit the beer or you did, okay.
Teach it. Exactly that. That's exactly what you do.
Okay, and then it hit you back, no doubt.
Oh yeah, and like so, if I'm not going to enjoy my night playing Danny Boy or any other, piece of music that's not connecting for me, but we're definitely having a few points in a party afterwards,
Yeah,
and so that was like every night of the week,
And did you end up having a reckoning or with the booze or?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, for many years, like I'd say, I quit it completely, drink, and I kind of went from like this kind of carnivorous, smoking, meat-eating creature from East Clare to being like a kind of a vegetarian, non-drinking, meditating, long-haired something like in another kind of reality. I switched all of those things,
Yeah,
and then started listening to jazz and Indian music and like just kind of went off into very different tangents.
Was there a kind of a a tension or a conflict or a moment that propelled all that? Did you meet a girl? Did like what was it that, like, where did the first vegetarian dinner come from? Like, did you?
Well, yeah, well, I did have a girlfriend who was vegetarian, like at the time, and I thought, like, God, this is odd stuff. Like, imagine that, like, no meat, and I you know, but you know, so you're at least meeting vegetarians or whatnot, you know. No, I kind of had like a number of incidences, I suppose, and like and gradually I'm drinking more and more and more and more, and it's getting more and more and more out of control, you know. And like and then you kind of, like, I think for everybody who has that problem, you know, you get to that point, like you see a moment when you have a choice, like, and the choice is, you know, you're going to, like, go down, you know, you're just not going to make it, or there's a chance, you have a chance to kind of pick another path here, you know, and I did, like after a heavy night of drinking, you know, like a friend of mine drove me home, you know, and like he couldn't wake me up in the car, you know, and I was asleep, and he left me there, and it was summer, and I woke up like it, you know, in the morning, like with a headache, with the sun beating down on me, wearing the clothes I was wearing that night, and I just came in, and like the fella that drove me home was sleeping on my couch, and anyway, so I came in, I said, Timmy, I says, I quit, I absolutely quit. So I did. So I quit alcohol that day, and I quit smoking cigarettes very soon after that. And then I started reading books, and I started, like, exploring spirituality and philosophy and meditation and all of that. And I just kept going further afield, you know. You know, and
in terms of the spirituality aspect, I was listening to you earlier, listening to your music rather, and thinking about you, and I had this kind of image of a Sufi or a Sufism. Is that a field that you've ever encountered or worked?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, encountered, like, I mean, vaguely in reading, and you know, and like, for example, like coming across the poetry of Rumi, and oh, okay, all right. And what are these, like, this Sufism, like, was like a beautiful thing, because like it was a religious practice that had dancing built into it, you know.
Yeah.
A kind of music in a certain sense, you know. And of course, you realize that in the world of Islam, like, it's highly unpopular, you know. Like they don't like it much now, it seems. But anyway, it's you find that with all the world religions, is that, like, there are, like, these sections, like whether it kind of could be like Jewish Kabbalists or Sufis, you know, or Benedictine monks, or you know, like, I was going, okay, so that end of it I like more, you know. I'm more, I don't like institutional religions very much, but I certainly can relate to the understanding that's actually within all religious belief, you know.
What, or rather, where or when or how did you first encounter meditation?
I think I was reading some books, and, like, you know, so like, I forget which ones, so but like Eastern books on Zen and Buddhism and stuff like that, and like meditation keeps coming up. Meditation. I'm going, all right, I'm going to have to do this, you know, like it's like, it's this great mystery, like, of a thing, like, that's out there. So I just went and like looked up what was the closest meditation center, like in Chicago, and it was like transcendental meditation, TM. You know, I don't really think that it matters hugely what particular form you engage with, but anyway, I engaged with that, like, and that became a kind of part of my practice, like, you know, and it kind of like, it was kind of in response to drinking, it was kind of like see what it's like to have, like, not just clarity, but a lot of clarity. See if that, like go the other, because actually drink is really cloudiness. Like, it doesn't illuminate at all. It just dulls the mind. Like it's just another way of dealing with boredom and frustration and blah, blah, blah. And, what have you. So I found that meditation was like a very effective answer also,
And did you stay with it?
Yeah. I mean, to this day, I still meditate. Now, I have to own up to the fact that I don't do it every day. Sometimes I do it for stretches, and then I kind of might be running around or traveling and under some hectic schedule and not do it. But then I inevitably come back to it,
Yeah, there's enough of a baseline there to return to.
Yeah.
Do you find, well, first of all, I was going to say as you get older, before I get to my next question, I do have a sense of, you say you're in your 60s, you do seem like a youthful, healthy 60s, because I suppose the drinking and the clean eating and all of that.
Yeah. That was in the early years.
Is health something you consciously invest in?
No, I'm not that health conscious at all. And I'm not that fit, and I don't work out, and I keep, geez, you got to work out. You should, you look after yourself. But somehow for whatever reason, I kind of look youthful, a little bit. I don't look there's a lot of other people, I think, in my imagination, at 60 something, that look a good bit older than me. But I for whatever reason, I don't. It's just good.
I would imagine a certain amount of it has to do with still doing what you love and having a spark of joy.
I think so. My theory of health is about that as well. About having fulfillment in your life, having projects that are can be challenging but engaging, that push you, that that make you want to get up in the morning, and get things done,
When you say projects that challenge you, is that's something that's still there, where it's you're not going to take the handy way here. You're looking for the kind of.
I wish I knew how to do that one.
Yeah.
I was right now. I'm working on this project with David Brophy. He's the conductor. He conducts the NSO and the concert orchestra and stuff like that. And there's a piece of chording, a piece of music from this 16th to 17th century that it's like a chord sequence called the folia, upon which people like Vivaldi and a lot of other people built music arrangements on it, right? Okay. And so lots of composers use this particular run of chords. It's kind of like a famous, from that era. And so the idea is that some kind of Irish music type thing could actually be composed on top of that chord structure and stuff. Because the problem here is I never had a music lesson in my entire life. I have vast areas of ignorance and backwardness, in the world of music and music theory. I have I say yes to this, and yet I don't actually know how I would do it. And so I start at adjusted, and I go, oh God, this is not easy. Oh God, I'm trying to kind of write a piece of music that will actually line up with these chords. Going I'm trying to write a piece of music from an upside down perspective here, and but I made a bit of progress anyway. So I feel like maybe if I can make a bit more, it'll open up. But the truth is, I'm always in over my head, always.
What do you like about that?
I don't like it, but it makes things happen.
Well, you don't like it, but yes, you are.
I do it, yeah. I do it. Some other part of me goes, you need to do this.
Yes,
you need to, because if I'm not doing that, what am I doing? I know. I also instinctively know that if I come completely back to all that's comfortable to me and easy for me to do, I could keep doing victory laps of that for hours.
Yeah. Just play the hits.
Yeah. Or just yeah, exactly. Just keep it simple. Just play straight up thread and get an accompanist and just go out and do the gig, and that's it.
Yeah. Was there a sense of that? Well, I actually don't know where the Gloaming's at. I'm just curious about that. So was there a sense that this has kind of leveled off and we've kind of brought it to a certain point, and now is it on hiatus, or where's the Gloaming at?
Well, it's kind of on hiatus, I suppose. Like we said, Dennis, obviously we lost.
Of course, yeah. We should talk about Dennis as well.
So that was kind of a thing. And actually, before the pandemic, we had kind of agreed to kind of take a bit of time off.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, Thomas, the piano player, who's a good friend, like essentially as a human being doesn't like to travel much. And like he really, his whole life is kind of like studio music production. And that's what he does every day, really, you know. So like in a sense, there's only 3 of us that might potentially, and then Queevy had some children recently and stuff like that. So, you know, anyway, what happens, of course, is that like when you put something like that on a hiatus, is we all go off, start doing other things. And that's what's happened, really, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's fine. I wouldn't say never, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know when, or, you know, who knows, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost like in divine time, the moment will appear if.
Yeah, I mean, like there's like we had a really good run, and like we made like 4 albums, really, like 3 studio, 1 live. We made 2 little films, and we played a whole bunch of concerts and loved it. And so, you know, I feel like, yeah, it actually did its thing. You know, we lasted, you know, probably longer than the Botti band, actually, you know. So there you go.
Would you mind speaking a little bit about Dennis?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, Dennis was one of those personalities that I, you know, like impacted my life hugely. But I got to know him in Chicago as well. And in fact, we were kind of, my first apartment on the way out on the southwest side, I was living across the street from him. And, well, I didn't know that at the time, but we met in a bar, and then I discovered, hey, geez, we're actually neighbours here, you know. But, yeah, and we were playing a lot of those same clubs, playing a lot of that stuff that was a bit soul strike. And he had a kind of a different music sensibility too. And that stuff was eating him up too, you know.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, he was working with different musicians and stuff like that, and I was out working with different musicians. But a moment came when we weren't working with anybody else, and that's when we kind of made a band, actually, and decided we would make some kind of music that had nothing to do with the scene that we were in at all. But we would still take gigs in it. But we had this kind of electric band, you know, like that was quite loud and kind of aggressive almost, you know. And like people liked us. People knew we were good players. You know, if you've ever come across this syndrome of like, you heard the band and you know, oh, they're all really great players. Can't stand it though. I know they're all really great. Like,
yeah.
I'm not getting anything from this. So we were kind of like that. Like people say, oh, they're great players, but Jesus, like, I don't think I can go through a whole night of this, you know. So there was a bit of that, you know. Like, so we had successful reputations, but not huge numbers of people wanting to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, like Dennis and I shared a house then during those years. And we lived together on the north side of Chicago, and so we were like really good friends, you know, close buddies. And then a couple of years later, when the band obviously wasn't going to go anywhere, and I ended up moving to Seattle, and it was a relationship as well, and it was a lot of other things. So I moved to Seattle, and I kind of abandoned Dennis there in Chicago then, But a couple of years later, after I'd made 1 or 2 albums, I came back and asked him if he would be willing to play a full summer with me or something like that. At which point he just dropped all his other gigs, says, I'm in. And we just kept going then for the next 20-something years, you know?
Yeah, I have a real sense of that you were sort of I wouldn't say brothers in arms, but whatever the musical equivalent is.
Well, that would be a good way to describe it.
Yeah. So it must be, you still feeling the loss of.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, it would have been like, I mean, it happened during the pandemic, so that there's some, like, the pandemic was this life-changing event anyway, like, so like you have one changing event inside of another one, kind of, like, oh, it felt like that, Well, like, he died at the end of the pandemic, really, but I knew he was going to die at that point,
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, if it had happened out of the blue, like ordinarily, and I hadn't time to kind of build up to it, like, I think it would have just shocked me to my core,
Yeah.
But and I'm not saying that it didn't still shock me. It did. I found it like hard to believe that it actually happened. Couldn't quite like imagine that future. Like all those years we played together. I never saw it coming like this. But that's that's life.
Yeah, it's we just don't know, do we?
No, we don't. We know very little, actually.
Yeah. Actually, another member of the band, you mentioned Thomas there. I think I remember hearing a story or reading it that as a young boy he used to write to one of the. Was it you or someone else in the band?
Me, actually, it started with like I was doing a tour in Ireland with Steve Cooney. This would be the early 90s, actually. We were in Dublin, we were everywhere. We were up in Derry, we were running around, and then after 4 or 5 gigs, I keep looking around, I keep seeing this same family, like at all the gigs, like, and this young fella, like, who was of course Thomas Bartlett, was there, and apparently, like, I discovered this afterwards, he had my first album, and he was a piano player, and he liked the first album, and he's just a little kid, like he's 9 or 10 or something like that, and he says to his dad and mom, he wants to go hear me. He saw me advertise. What kind of a kid is this? He saw me advertise in Time Out magazine in Dublin, and he asked him to bring him to the gig.
But he is American, isn't he?
He's American, yeah. They were just in Ireland for the summer.
Yeah.
We're actually on their way to Nepal, I think, after that.
Wow.
But then they decided they didn't have a plan for what they would do in Ireland. So what they decided to do was go on the same tour that Steve and I were on, and kind of come to the various different gigs and see what Ireland would throw at them and that. And so the night I spoke to them was the night of that IRA ceasefire in the 90s in Derry. And I was there, and that was my first night in the Bogside. And there was young Thomas Bartlett as well. And I spoke to them then. But anyway, you would think that I would remember this kid and that family from that experience. But I actually, in another year or two, had completely forgotten. And we got an email asking, do we ever play in Vermont? He was from Vermont, And we wrote back saying, well, we would, if somebody wanted us to play there, we would. It's not like we're objecting to playing in Vermont, but if you know somebody that you think would put on the concert, we'd be happy to reach out, of course. Anyway, a week or two passed, and another email came back saying, we have a venue, we have the date, we have the blah, 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 blah. Are you willing to do that? And we go, sure, absolutely. So the emails keep going back and forth. And then we ask, now, if we come in by train and we get to whatever it was, who would pick us up? Or if we flew into Burlington, would somebody pick us up? That kind of thing. And the email came back and says, well, I'll have to ask my mom about that. At which point we discovered, like, we had been booked by like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old kid, and to play a concert.
Yeah.
So that's my history with Thomas.
And then the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's just. It's incredible.
It is actually. It kind of is incredible, really, But
yeah. Wow. How do you fare with the travel these days?
Well, I don't travel as much as I used to, but let's face it, there is absolutely no way to not have it be exhausting. And and gradually, like, as much of it as I have done, like when I pack my suitcase, I keep thinking this time would be different. Like I won't get exhausted, but I will.
Yeah, yeah. And life took a twist then a few years ago when I suppose Cupid had a bit of a pop into the.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, I met my wife in actually at the festival in Feakle, and she had opened an early years centre, kind of a Steiner-based education centre in East Clare. Now, funnily enough, I was familiar with this Steiner education thing and familiar with the Waldorf School in Chicago, and had friends who were involved in that. So that was kind of like sympathetic company for the kind of music I was making. I think that seemed like I seemed to find myself connected to that community bit by bit. Anyway, she had built a new centre, and like her friends said to her at the concert in Feakle, "Why don't you ask him to play for the opening?" And so she did. She came up, but she has a Spanish accent and she speaks very fluent English, but I was still kind of confused about what she was actually talking about. So anyway, like at the end of the summer, I was swinging by Tuamgraney, and I called up and I says, "Well, can I come and see this project? What is it you're talking about?" And I came by, and then I met Lena that day, and we just ended up talking for hours and hours and hours, and that was it. Right there, that was it.
That was it.
I knew it.
Magic. So now you're based in Spain, but you're still very much I had a look at your upcoming gigs, and you're still kind of on the road, and Ireland's still very dominant there as well.
Very much so, yeah. I'm back and forth to Ireland a lot, and like have a lot of things going on this summer now in August, and we're very busy time. So,
do you ever sort of check out completely and down tools, and just sort of take to the hills and disappear for a while?
Yeah, I'm not so good at that. And part of me knows that would be very good for me actually to do that. But I haven't given it the time. I mean, I think the only time when I truly down tools, and I didn't even down them then, was during the pandemic. But I certainly didn't travel, of course, But yeah, I should. The thing is, like when you work for yourself.
Yeah,
you do all that. Like you can't tell if you've worked enough. You can't tell. You can't figure out, are you entitled to time off? Like,
yeah, I think most people listening now will sanction some time off. accrued leave.
Yeah. So I probably have some response to being told I was lazy when I was a kid,
Yeah.
And now I'm like, no, I'm virtuously hardworking,
Yeah. And because it is posited as the virtue that we need to be industrious at all times.
Hardworking, doing, and I overdo that,
Yeah, and that's quite common in a farming background as well, because you can't just lie up and let animals or
no, you can't. Like there's a thing in motion, and you just have to be there,
Yeah. I'm just conscious. I feel like I'm encouraged to take time off, and then on the other hand, I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for lowering the output of Martin Hayes as a result of a podcast here. But
no, that's not part.
Yeah, no. I did a 10-day Vipassana there in Australia last year, like a 10-day silent meditation, and
how was it?
It was great, but it's like I've been self-employed for many years myself, and it's very much what you're saying, and there's the financial aspect of that too, is no one's paying.
That's right, Jay. You see, it's very different for us to stop than for somebody who has actually paid income. Because like when you stop earning,
Yeah.
and you start spending. Like I get like little flashes of anxiety, like when I'm like not working for a long period of time and I'm spending money. I'm going, okay, this got to stop. Like, I don't mind spending money, but I need to see it coming in as well.
Yeah. And that is a part of being a professional artist, if you like, as well. Is that there's a business end to keeping the show on the road as well.
That's right, and it's stressful.
And I think maybe people don't often understand the economics in the sense that somebody has a big name or they're well known, and there isn't necessarily massive checks being written all the time, because who's buying?
It's like to anybody who never books you and who knows you and sees your name, you're worth a fortune, and you should be getting paid huge amounts of money, and you probably are. And to anybody who books a gig, they're going, you want what? It's like it's like the reality is that we, like, I don't make huge money or anything. I just make a middle class living. At best.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's a good deal for me. Like, I mean, because I'm getting to do things that are meaningful for me, and I'm getting to do things I love and things that I'm good at, and all of that. And but like I sat down with musicians and other musicians, and they think I'm a millionaire, and I'm going, nope, no, that's not how it works at all.
Yeah, I suppose I find it kind of sometimes useful to dispel some of the myths that are out there. Not just in music, but in any reality as well. Is that we're mostly, all of us together, trying to survive, whether you're a musician or a refugee or whatever it is, and to kind of see that we're on the road together. And it's made better when certainly when we have a bit of music, but also the honesty as well about some of the challenges.
Yeah, no, it's a challenging, like being a professional musician or full-time artist or anything like that. It's like a challenging reality. I mean, it's the gig economy, but of course, like the whole world is going to turn into the gig economy. We're kind of pioneers in that, like, because like most people are going to end up working like that, and corporations prefer it. Like, if you are responsible for yourself, you're responsible for your retirement, you're responsible for your health, you're responsible for your, like, and you work under contracts. That's becoming like common enough now,
Martin, as we finish up, I feel myself wanting to go back to the beginning and come back to the piece of art and this notion of kind of, digging and mining and refining and going back to like the source, like exploring down to the source of the river. Where do you feel you're at now in life with that journey for you?
Well, it's good. It's good. Like one of the nice things that has happened playing this particular music, traditional Irish music, is that it sounds better to me now than it ever did. Like, like the tunes feel like more powerful and magical than they did even. Like I see it as, it didn't become jaded. The more time I spent with it, the richer it has become. And so that's a good thing, from my point of view. Like, because it is like the melodies are just like really powerful and beautiful things. And I'm like, I'm feeling good, as a performer now. I feel, like I have a lot of options and choices, and I'm getting to play with lots and lots of different musicians, and like have lots and lots of different experiences, such that I never experience any kind of boredom or anything like that, which is great.
Well, long may it continue, and may you never be bored, which I'm sure you won't. From the sounds of it.
Thanks, Rory.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Martin.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.